Pen turn on. Yeah, Masterclass for surveys. So we released this functionality about a week ago. We've been plugging it on socials for this week. Idea is basically to walk everyone through how it works, what you can do with it, uh, issues or things people have raised, and just answering them quite directly. Any advanced bits of surveys that, especially a services team, well, I guess everyone needs to know we can do, but the services team might want to do. So yeah, hopefully we'll walk through all of that. So first thing to note is that it's part of the WYSIWYG. So you've got to be in the WYSIWYG. Go to my favorite page. So you'll find it in the widgets area. So it's just over here, surveys, and you end up here. So we have this kind of survey creator screen, which you'll access just behind the big white button. These are boxes which will hopefully get filled as you build your survey. You can supply your own JSON up front. You could just pop a pre-built survey, or if you're copying it from another test or something, you could just grab the questions or the theme and pop them in the box beforehand. And then when you press the button, they'll get populated into the survey creator. But you press this button, the survey creator is quite big. So if it looks like the screen's frozen, just give it a sec. Yeah, it's like a couple of megabytes worth of JavaScript. So it's, yeah, not easy to run. You saw we started off with nothing. And when you start in here, kind of give people a title and some questions and just some stuff to work with. So it's just an NPS survey type of example. So if this is kind of the most common thing people are looking to do, then, they're kind of already on their way with it. But you have a title for a survey as a whole. This will appear as, it is optional, but it will appear as this kind of separate bar across the top of the survey in the rendered pop-up. Got a little description that can sit underneath it as well. All fairly kind of self-explanatory stuff. We've got pages of questions. Again, you can give your page a name if you want to. You can give it a description if you want to. You don't have to. A bunch of questions. And again, it's just a kind of WYSIWYG builder. So just click on things, make your updates. Question types. So you can change the type of an existing question, or you can like drag and drop stuff in. Some of this stuff is not super clear when it comes to stuff like checkboxes as to what the buttons do. This, if you hover over it, it does make sense. But it's like, get rid of the option, provide your own, create something new. And then you've got kind of none or other. So you've got these type of options. So if you enable it, you can see it pops up. If you enable none, again, you can see it kind of stops being grayed out. So kind of, yeah, it looks usable at that point. And because the build is quite detailed, there's all this kind of options. So if you do enable other, you can change the way it's worded. Over there, add some placeholders and stuff like that. For this, again, this is rating. So if we look at the values, you've got your min, you've got your max. You can change it to stars or smiley faces. Kind of create your step value, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of the principle of questions. You've got a bunch of them. Create your questions, add them to the end of the page, create extra pages worth of questions if you need to. Down this side, there are then some kind of useful things. So we looked at the This is general stuff, read only, required, whatever it might be. Required is probably one you use more often than not. Values we've already looked at. And then have layout. So there's a bunch of options in here for how exactly you want the thing to look. Most useful ones I found are things like, where do you want questions to be aligned? Do you want it to be half size with an extra dynamic thing that pops out next to it, depending on the answer that you give? So all those kind of more detailed options are in here as well. Error message, description, title, alignment. I don't know why you'd ever want to put the question at the bottom, but the options are there for it. Kind of control the widths and stuff. We then have this, which is conditions. And again, the things are quite descriptive. Make the question visible if. This is probably the one that people use the most, where you end up with dynamic questions. If you click this little icon, so you can write it with code if you want to. This is probably the slightly kind of friendlier approach. So if we take this new question that we built, we could say make this question visible only if the previous question, which is the score that they give, is less than 5. So, very disappointing score. You can add the extra conditions to it. So maybe it was the response to something else as well. You kind of want to glue it all together. These values are kind of in isolation, by the way. So you couldn't say, show this question if they're on mobile, or show this question if something's in the data layer or something like that. These are all kind of isolated to the survey itself and not other things you can bring in for this bit, which I know came up. But, create your questions, click apply. You'll see some code gets generated. Once you start looking at it a few times, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, pick your conditions, set the value if something, reset the value of something. And then, yeah, that's that. You can run quizzes through this. We've not done that yet. I think there's some options I might have blocked for now. So in the future, we'll be able to do that, and stuff like this will be useful then. You can also kind of then glue values together based on inputs. So you can ask questions in a friendly way and then store them in a kind of glued up way in the back. And then got validation rules. When should we be throwing errors, basically? So, quite detailed control over the questions that get created. There is a HTML option which has been blocked for now, but I will be bringing it back. So yeah, at some point you'll be able to provide your own HTML as well, which could include stuff like a graphic you put somewhere and something else. But basically create a survey. You've got your previews. Again, you'll see little icons up here. So if you do want to preview it on mobile, because you've got the kind of card view in the corner, pick a little phone, flip it. So this is roughly, something to the effect of what you'd see in the rendered pop-up. I would take these previews with the kind of pinch of salt. It's useful to know what it looks like when it's slim. If you're presenting it that way, if you're doing a full page version, it's useful to understand what it looks like as a full screen. But when you save the survey, you'll get the actual output. But it should be pretty close to this. We then have theming. There's a few things in here which perhaps by chance you might find useful. So I stumbled onto this high contrast one, and it looks just like Dog's Trust. The colors are very similar. So, if you find something in here which happens to work, great. This is very Google Formsy. You've got light mode and dark mode as well. You can kind of pick something that works for the customer. We've got this concept of panels. So right now everything is kind of within a panel, or you can pull them out basically, and then it's kind of much more of a flat view, which looks quite nice. So you'll find that just in themes, and then it's just without panels. And yeah, headers, background. There's a few bits in here. In appearance, you'll notice this little checkbox. That would take the few options you have into something quite detailed. So this would allow you to control pretty much every little corner of, how things are presented. So you can go to the advanced mode if you want to, if you need to. If not, you could just say, my accent color is green, make everything green, and it should hopefully just pick all the times where that purplish color was used and just kind of wholesale swap them out. So theming, there is another way to theme as well, which is to provide your own CSS. I'll show you how to do that in a sec. This is a very ugly panel for now, but these are basically all the rules that we've got. So we had that question 1 rule that we set up. If NPS score is less than 5, make question 1 visible. So it's just a fairly straightforward output of all those rules and a kind of ability to make your own if you want to, but this is not the ideal place to do it. The ideal place to do it is where we saw before, where you're in the question already. So just, if you're doing it, I would suggest just doing it over here. It's kind of a lot friendlier to play with. But that's there. And you end up with this, which is a block of JSON describing the survey and everything about it. And yeah, from this point onwards, there are a few options here as well. I've not really played around with these just yet. Export might be quite useful one day. But yeah, build your survey. When you click close, that code ends up populating here. And we built a custom, dark mode green colored theme. So we've got a bunch of theming values just here as well. So if we hop back in and try and make our changes. Oh, the theme's not being preserved. That's interesting. It should be. I'll try and deal with that. But yeah, you kind of go back in and you'll be able to go make those changes. There should be, yeah, if you're just on the top level, so kind of where you click dictates what happens in this panel down the side. So if you happen to be on a page or on a question, these things will look a little bit different. But if you're on the top level, you'll notice this over here as well, which is your thank you page. So you can have different types of thank you pages based on conditions. So in this case, you can see there's, 2 different ones based on the NPS score that users provided, higher than basically 9 plus or lower than 9. So yeah, if we do need to provide, different guidance, we can do that. And then there's a kind of generic markup as well. Yeah, quiz mode for now I would leave. I've not played with this much, but we will do at some point. You do that, and then you've got this option here, custom CSS. This basically, as described, is just a box for you to put your own CSS into. So you can't put it in here, which is kind of the normal place you would look to add your own CSS. The survey, when it renders, is in an iframe and it's kind of isolated from the rest of the page. Is the only way I could stop variables from leaking and themes clashing and stuff like that. So this would apply to the page itself and the kind of container if you want. This is to the actual iframe and the actual survey. So anything you put in here, we inject into the survey. But it's just a bunch of CSS, ends up in a style tag. So we've got that. We've got a few options for positioning. So do you want it, I should say bottom right, interesting. So do you want it in the bottom corner? Do you want it as a full page takeover where we literally don't show anything behind it? Or do we want it in a modal, in which case there'll be a kind of a bit of the page behind it. I think it's about 10% of the page behind that you'll see, and 80% of it will be taken up with the survey. Yeah, we've got a few options. First time we made some of these fields dynamic in the widget builder as well. So like if you click something not relevant, things will disappear. Just a little thing for me. Um, Rendering engine. So if we ever do update survey builder engine, we won't break old surveys. So we'll have more options that pop up in here just to say use version 2 and anyone on version 1 will remain unaffected. Auto close on submission. We hang for about 2 seconds, I think, a second and a half, 2 seconds, when someone finishes their survey. And then if this is checked, it will just close it down automatically, which is probably the experience most people want. Usual trigger conditions: when do you want it to happen? Immediately, on exit, on delay. And how often do you want it to happen? Once ever, once per session, whatever it might be. Yeah, click apply. We create a bunch of JavaScript. This is how every single widget works. Create a bunch of JavaScript, pop-up appears, job done. So for the services team in particular, I guess, but everyone's knowledge, if you wanted to take this code and drop it into an advanced editor test, JavaScript is just JavaScript, right? It doesn't matter what editor you put it into. So if you wanted to add this onto tests that you built already, or have the devs run it and tweak things a little bit, they're welcome to do that. There's a bunch of events that get broadcast, which I'll flip over to help doc in a sec. But basically, we have the iframe is pushing events every time you do something of note to the parent page, and they'll be tracked as survey underscore something, just to separate them from any other events that you're capturing. So we've got submissions, which includes custom data for the questions that you built. And then we should have this, which is every other event that we care about. So if we look at the help doc, there's quite a few help docs for this feature. It's probably one of the better documented things. So there's a bunch of things. I tried to kind of group them. So we've got a success metric, survey submission. We've got interactions on page. So survey, page, something, which is person got to a page, basically the equivalent of clicking the next button. We then have focus events. People have clicked on a given field and we'll have the ID of the field. I'll talk more about IDs in a sec. Someone has populated an answer of some kind. It might not be the final one they stick with, but they have clicked a relevant answer, and then they've triggered an error. So hopefully between these, you get some decent form analytics of, what's going on. And as this suggests, 10 questions over 4 pages, you'd end up with like 35 metrics. So it can add up. Easy enough to kick out the reports, but hopefully this will tell you more about what's going on in that little area than most analytics that we have for most of the things that we do. Going back into our survey. So there's a little thing just to note here. So as you're building these things, if you give them useful IDs, so like we've got a question, we've given it a title, like a friendly message for the user, but it will default to an ID, which is just like question 1. When we collect the data, question 1 is probably not very helpful to you. Maybe it's fine if you've only got a couple, but if it's a dynamic survey and things can hop in and out, tracking a metric called survey answered question 1 is probably not very helpful. So just, try and give things IDs that are helpful. It helps here. It also helps when we're in that kind of conditional logic thing where it's like the difference between, let's talk about the features people has provided or question 1. It just makes everything a bit more readable if you go to that little bit of effort. ignore this. That's got nothing to do with surveys. That's from something else. But yeah, in principle, we've got these surveys. They run. They sit in a little iframe. One of the interesting things is this iframe as well. So it's just a page. It lives on the CDN. So if you were to grab the page, which by itself won't do anything because we're not pushing any questions into it, but you can see there's, a page doing some stuff. So even if you wanted to go and take control of the iframe that renders this thing and say, hey, we want it to work roughly how it does, but we want to do something extra with it. Maybe inject your own JavaScript to do something special. You could just go and save the source code of this survey embed, as we call it. Go and make your changes, and then just point your surveys in your own code to use this instead of the generic one everyone else uses. So for devs who want to do things a little bit off-piste, you can just go and save pages down and then go and tweak them as you wish. There's everything can be tailored, basically, is the point I'm making. That's kind of the crux of building the survey. You would then go and QA it as you would do any other experience. Use the widget or whatever and get yourself into test. I won't bother showing you how to QA. There are, yeah, good help docs in here explaining just in principle what it is, how to do it, question types available, a few bits. I started to create these walkthroughs. This is 2 minutes long. The other ones might be a fraction longer. But the idea is to have, simple videos people can follow. So if things aren't clear, try and hop onto a help site and just look through the walkthroughs as well. The videos are pretty decent. Got a few more that we'll be uploading soon. These ones are empty, but they'll have stuff soon. The custom renderer was that taking control of the iframe bit that I spoke about. So we'll have a proper walkthrough in there for how to do things way off-piste. So yeah, hopefully all of that stuff kind of makes sense. There are a few bits which are a little bit harder to show, but I'm happy to talk through. When um, so when we're building these surveys, there are kind of two things you could want to do with them. One is to basically just ask the question to a user, and it's kind of the usual survey use case, right? You ask a question, people will answer it. At some point, maybe a week later or a couple of weeks later, you'll look back at the answers, which you'll need to do a data extract for to get at the actual answers people provided. But you look back afterwards and do that kind of retrospective analysis of what people have given you. The slightly more useful use case in my mind, both useful, but slightly more interesting one is the personalization use case. So all of the answers that you provide in the survey, we are pushing into local storage automatically. So there's a key called WT surveys or something like that in local storage. And all of the answers as people provide, as they provide them, get pushed into local storage. From local storage, if you wanted to, you could just push it back into data layer and then use it in the segment builder. So you could provide segments to customers that say, if your NPS score is less than 8, this is a segment of people who are at risk or having difficulties. Or you've got your kind of loyalists at the top, you've got your amateurs or your novice, your professionals, whatever questions you're asking users. Because we're storing it in local storage, you can get it back out into a segment if you want to. Or because it's in local storage, you could go and crunch it as part of a test and say, if people have said they're a beginner golfer, show them these banners. If they've said they're an advanced golfer, show them these other banners. And you can do that just by asking the question, and then the data kind of cycles itself into the right place. Um, you okay, Chris?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. Sorry.
Go for it.
How you doing? So is that already there? Are you basically pushing the answers to local storage now, as well as to the extract? Is that
Correct.
already? Oh, that's wonderful. It's really
Yeah,
good.
it's going to local storage automatically. It does not cycle back into your data layer automatically yet.
No,
That will
no, no.
require an integration for us to be able to do because it's a
Yeah.
tag change at that point.
Well,
Um,
and also
yeah,
you don't want to just flood the optimized layer with a whole load of stuff that doesn't matter. But that's really cool. Excellent.
yeah. So yeah, when we're talking about the feature, it's both. It's the kind of qualitative analysis that we couldn't do without tools like, some kind of survey tool, Typeform or something like that, Google Forms. We couldn't do that until now. But yeah, it's that personalization use case as well. We want people to be able
Well,
to make use of this information in the moment. So the second someone tells you, I am an expert, you go, cool, all right. We know what we
that's
need to
it.
know. Data's saved. Let's go do something with it.
Yeah, but it's closed loop. That's in fact the ones that I've got were for that purpose because it's like, well, who are you? Right now, you want to personalize. Well, the survey's one thing, but then it's like becoming actionable. So that's great. I thought.
Yeah, exactly. Um, if I look back at, say, we've done a bunch of questions that people had asked.
Just off the back of
Uh,
Chris's question, Sandeep, is there anything in here that we don't do that some of these other tools offer that will be appealing to people that we know of that they'll, if we say you can do it through us now, is there anything going to come back with which is obvious, which we can't do, which we can tackle or not?
I think the biggest thing we don't do that a proper survey tool would do is reporting on the answers that people give.
Yeah.
For us, it's filtering into a custom data field. You got to extract it and use Excel or something and go build your own graphs or word clouds or whatever.
Got it.
Most survey tools, you would have a bar chart or something saying here are the top responses for that question.
Yeah.
Um, when we can report on the contents of custom data fields in the reporting itself,
Yeah.
which is a topic we have been exploring in the past, that might change quickly overnight. But that's the biggest limitation I can think of. Beyond
Okay.
that, it's a survey you can produce highly detailed, quite varied with the questions that you're asking, conditional surveys, and render them on any website. So
Yeah.
in principle, it's the delivery of the survey is great. It's just how you report on the data that's not strong.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. Just worth knowing in case we try and push people and then they, what they're going to come back with.
Yeah, for
Can I
sure.
ask a question there, Sandeep, as well on that topic?
Go for it, dude.
So I used to work for Voice of the Customer solution for a little while, but actually the customizableness of our survey questions, should we not really turn this into like a feather in our cap? So obviously it limits us with that reporting, like you just touched on, but actually allowing them to pick their own scoring figures and the types of questions they ask is actually a unique offering that we have that some of the more traditional VOC suppliers don't have, like Medallia, in Moment, the one I worked at, Service Tick. They'll have a very closed set of questions that have to be asked in this language with this scoring to get reported on. So could we actually sort of turn it into like, feather in our cap, something unique that we do that others don't, rather than
It would
potentially
be
a
good
negative?
to explore how much of a selling point that is compared to pure play voice of customer solutions. Like I've used Qualtrics in the past, and we've just created any question we want to, and we put it live, and we've got answers and responses back in the UI. So maybe there is a class of those kind of tools that are not very good and not very flexible, and we're better than them. But I haven't used enough of them to cherry pick and say we're better than, whichever ones you mentioned because of being more flexible with the questions. It's not something I know of to be able to push the point, I guess. But we should do absolutely as kind of a KSP selling for a feature,
Yeah. I was going to say, couple of questions I had on the design side. How you
Mhm.
talked around the light and the dark mode. Is that based on us just setting it live in them modes, or is it you can create a styling for light mode if the customer's in that, and a styling for dark mode if the customer's in that, or is it you just decide what you want to show?
It's not based on the user being like their machine being preferred to dark mode or light. It's based on the pop-up itself and just a isolate thing. So in this case, you would say everybody gets the dark mode version of this theme.
Okay, and then with the selection of, well, I suppose two-part question on the how it presents. I know obviously we had bottom right in there, which said bottom left, but comes up bottom right. Is there going to be more of them in the future where you can have it pop up, or is
My
it like
plan
that's
was
where we're set at the minute?
my plan was to do like we've got something for some of the other widgets where it's got like it split the page up into 9 squares, and
Yeah.
it's like, do you want it in the top left, middle left? And then as I was building this, it was like, who on earth would want a survey in the top left corner of the page? That would look so weird. So maybe we'll do the 2 bottom corners, and then I think full page and modal, maybe with a few more options for the size of the modal, will probably be the only things I imagine people would use.
Yeah.
But Raquel mentioned things like animation in the past, so having a little thing which sits in the corner as a kind of drawer, and people can click on it and the drawer will open and it will kind of pull the survey out. So then maybe those kind of how to launch and animate the entry sort of things that we might look at. Again, it just depends on if people use it and how important it is. Or it could be a random thing where for a services project, you guys take the engine of building and creating the survey and getting it on the page, and you say, I've done my own work to get it positioned so it pops out the corner. And once the work is done, I'll just come and steal your code and we'll bake it into the product. So
Okay.
yeah.
And then the other side of that as well, is it always going to be a pop-up, or is there going to be a way to actually implement it as like a section of the site? Or a
For now,
layer of the
pop-up.
site, I think.
The reason for the pop-up is that it uses a library like jQuery and like React, which is quite old, and I think it has broken websites in the past. The only safe way of getting it onto a site is to stick it in an iframe where it belongs to itself in isolation, and there's no way it could possibly affect anything else. If you wanted to, like if you knew the size of the survey that you wanted to get on the page and you wanted to control it yourself, there's nothing stopping you from embedding an iframe into the body of a page. But it's not something a widget buildery type of tool would be able to do without something going wrong, or needing to build a lot of guardrails around. If we put it over here, how can we control the size and still make sure it looks okay and all these kind of things?
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking of things like your review things where they have like a little section within the site that's still an iframe, but yeah, that might show an NPS of up to 5. But then yeah, actually having it embedded in the page rather than it popping up to ask that question.
Yeah.
It's the one. So if it's an iframe standing, could we not do something like like with a YouTube embed script? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's just an iframe. You could put it wherever you want to.
Yeah, because I think maybe that's what the guys are perhaps alluding to. You know, in terms of like, let's take it as an object, can I stick it in the page, can I stick it in the content, and then you've got the full. Yeah, anyway.
None of the widgets have that kind of a functionality. You know, some of them would look quite decent on the page somewhere instead of being floating elements. The reason we've gone down the floating elements route is that we don't need to pick a point to insert them and worry about, hey, but the page in this case is restricted to 200 pixels gap and nothing else, and it's going to break and look stupid.
Totally, yeah, totally. No, it has to be an object. I think it's more,
yeah.
it's
got to be a developer-based thing. If you go down that route, I can't see it working well without that.
Yeah, but like with if you were to inject a YouTube video into a page, you've got your styles, you've got your parameters, and then you've got your video URL. I guess that's what we're after here for the survey. It's almost like you've got a common sort of schema to sort of like inject it and control it.
Yep.
I have a question. So if you put it in an iframe, can you track the stuff?
Yes. Normally you can't understand where the question comes from. But this iframe, so you wouldn't be able to create your own click handler that said, let me go and track a click on this button. Yeah. But the survey is broadcasting loads of events as people do useful things. So the survey is telling the parent page, hey, someone has clicked on this field, they've answered a question, they've triggered errors, they've hopped across pages, all the things that I showed you in that doc. And so things will track, but it's not a developer trying to create a click conversion or a something conversion on that field. It's just that I bake a lot of analytics into how the iframe works, because otherwise you'd be screwed and you'd have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, cool. So yesterday I did a very modest presentation on the surveys. I'm glad I got a couple of answers now. So one of their questions was, can this be exported to advanced editor? So we can, which is good. Another one she asked was, can we create a project that has multiple surveys in different pages? So a survey, so it would be if someone saw the home page and interacted with a survey, then they will not see the survey on the films page. But if they did not interact on the home page, they will see the one on the films page, and so on and so on. Would that be possible?
So the visual editor doesn't give you that degree of control like if someone did something over here, don't do it over here. But you do get the JavaScript to render the surveys.
Yeah. So
if a developer, so if a developer is building the tests anyway, then yeah, absolutely, you've got complete control of the code. You decide to put the survey on the page whenever you want to, and so all of these conditions of do it on the home page, but if people don't answer, do it over here, or don't because they did this. Like, you've got all the information you need to make sense of what you want to show when. It's just a developer to work out the logic and make it happen.
So it would be something feasible if she would create a couple of surveys the way she wants. We wouldn't be interfering with it. And she would say, for this page, it's this survey, and we just fetch the visual editor test that she prepared, and we just capture the code and pop it into the advanced editor test.
That would be the easiest way to do it. Yeah, just get them to build it themselves in the WYSIWYG, click save, leave it in pending or something, but just get them to save it. And then you've got all the code, and you could just copy paste all the important bits.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a bit of a different use case, and it may be more of a developer side. But on the results that you get back from this, I'm more thinking like if you've got an experience that you're then asking people around when they come back to the site afterwards, are you going to be able to have the data that could have like a live update if, let's say, there's a certain experience that people are doing or a certain holiday someone's doing, where you could then add, like, show it in a 1 to 5 of this is the rate, similar to Trustpilot, and then but using it as your own site and people are engaging with your survey rather than through an external provider. Would you be able to then build that as a live kind of updating 1 to 5 versus something else, I guess?
You can, in the data layer, if you capture the identifying bits, like a product ID or a URL or something, then every response will have that information tagged along with it. And in that case, yeah, you've got the information that you need. So it requires a fraction bit more work. Normally we don't capture URLs. Normally we don't stick the product ID in the data layer. But if we do, then yeah, we can do that.
Okay, perfect. Cheers.
I have another question. Sorry.
Go for it. No,
Thinking
this is
about-
the whole point.
So when you so when you mention that we can create segments, can we really create segments saying if I go to the segment manager and I say question 5, yes. So people who replied yes, I can then create a new project just for that segment. How do I save it?
Yeah, absolutely you can. So let me just see if I've got surveys. Okay, I've not got an entry saved, but I'll show you the principle. So in local storage, we would automatically get a value here saying here's the information that we care about. So like it would be a key called WT surveys, and it would just be a flat list of all of the questions they have answered, where the names of each field would be the names that we provide here. Panel back out, so it'd be things like that NPS score. So as long as we read local storage and put it into our data layer, which is the bit of, we need to make an integration, or, a dev can do that probably in a few minutes. It's not a difficult job. But once something is in our data layer, you could then very easily, we've got a survey, got a segment, yeah, we'll show you here. So once anything is in our data layer, whether it's the survey stuff or anything else, you could have a key which just says survey.nps score is equal to, is less than, and their answer. So the key is we are putting stuff in local storage. Somebody, a developer for now, and we'll try and automate in the near future with an integration, but someone needs to put it into our data layer.
Yeah.
The second it's in our data layer, as with everything else in the data layer, you can just go and build a segment and run your test.
Cool. Perfect.
I was going to say, so with that, say people put an NPS score of 1 to 5 and it was anything below a 3. If you wanted to then offer a discount for a further booking or something in the future, you'd use that as anything less than 3, they get this banner which gives them a 10% off code or something.
Yeah, exactly. And you could do that bit of the journey with a widget in the WYSIWYG as well if you wanted to. But however you choose to put the banner on the page, yeah, absolutely. We are serving experiences to segments of people. That's the principle of it. And the experience could be a pop-up or a banner or a promo, voucher code, whatever it might be. Yep.
Like
Cool.
all the widgets, so we can target and segment it then. So if we wanted to say even down to time of day, longitude or latitude, we can target who sees the survey as well as the exit intent piece as well.
Yeah, it's both sides of that can get segmentation. So it's who sees the survey could be a segmented rule. So only show the survey to people on mobile in London at this time of day, based on this history stuff we've collected about them. And then when they provide their response, and then we say, right, what do we do now? Serve an experience to them based on their response. That again could be segmented as well. So on both sides of the survey.
I was just going to ask around, and I think Alice shared something around this, impact of surveys on test results and sort of general advice for running things side by side. It was just a point that sort of
Yep.
sparked interest.
So there is no single answer to this question, and this is why being able to test the impact of having the survey or not, as you saw in the WYSIWYG, I built it as part of the A/B test flow. So nothing versus the survey. This is really, really important to do. So Ada found asking the question hurt conversion, and it's a bit of a shame it does. But we've tested a lot of times in the past, and I've got some use cases in the case study deck, or the other way around. I've got case studies in the use case deck that say, for this customer, asking the question did not hurt conversion. Just asking the question increased conversion, even though we didn't do anything with it to begin with. It was just people feel like you care. So it varies, it depends, and being able to test it is the important bit. You know, it needs to sit as something you can do in a proper testing tool and not just, you know, we've turned on surveys.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. You know, we'll never say it doesn't hurt conversion. It's just there are times, quite a few times, where we have observed that it's actually perfectly fine to ask.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Hello.
Can I just add my little 5 cents to this conversation? Yeah. So it was the one that where it hurt conversion was, and the way they wanted to test it was quite, I would say quite complex. There were like smiley faces, there were expandable, further sort of questions asking a user to specify if they were like a bit like what Sandeep had, like if they scored less than, we would expand and ask them for the questions. And that was shown on several pages in the funnel. So for them, the answer was no, as Sandeep said, but in general, it may be yes. Actually, what I've seen they did, and I would not probably, I thought it was a bit strange. I don't think they did it with us though. They asked a question and they did not allow, at some points, they did not allow a user to close the answer or not to select an answer, which probably as well is not ideal UX experience. So obviously you can do anything. It's just moderation and testing and common sense, I guess.
And the very final thing I just wanted to share was, you know, if we capture user IDs for this, you know, Google Analytics IDs, we could go and send that information back to them. If we push survey responses back into their analytics tool, they would be able to go and segment by people who have had good or bad responses. And that might unlock things down their marketing journey that we have no visibility of. So that was just the final point, was like the data doesn't just need to live with us. There's nothing stopping you from relaying it into another system where they can go and run a whole ad campaign to people who've given them a 2-star, you know, score, something like that. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with this. Hopefully Masterclass has been helpful.
Oh, good.
I'm hoping, we all just become more experts in this kind of stuff, the deeper view you get into it. So the next time you ask questions, at least you can answer them straight away.
Yeah,
That's
thank
really,
you.
really helpful.
No, nice one, Sandy. Really well done. It's great.
All right. That's one,
Love it.
guys.
Thanks.
Catch you all
Cheers.
later. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
See you then. Bye-bye.